Today on The Big Story.
My daughter had 100% in psychology and history. How can anyone get 100% in history?
In English. I mean, I can't believe it.
So my mom told me to tell her teacher कि ये सब्जी नहीं खाती.
A child who gets a 99% because your cutoff is 99 is good enough, and a child who's 98.5 is not good enough. I mean, what are you trying to tell? Come on, what are you telling that child?
At the end of the lesson, there used to be like a small box of activity, but I can't remember doing any of them.
It was only maths that was taught from a textbook. Everything else was experiential. You wanted to understand a law in physics, you were walked across to IIT and you saw it visually.
Yeah.
You're never going to forget it.
Way back in the 90s, people who didn't do anything became teachers. That कुछ नहीं किया, लड़की बड़ी हो गई है, she's done her graduation, post-graduation, B.Ed तो कर ही लो.
There is a lot of people who need it as a job. A lot of them later on, when they do the work, fall in love with the work.
Yeah.
That's different. It's not like they may come into it as a job, but then they actually fall in love with it and do it.
It's like an arranged marriage. कि पहले शादी कर लो फिर प्यार हो जाएगा.
The views expressed in this podcast are the speaker's own. The Quint neither endorses nor is responsible for them.
Welcome to The Big Story, listeners. This is Prateek.
And this is Anjali.
Yay. And in this episode, we are talking about
Education.
शिक्षा.
पढ़ाई.
Anjali, आप कहाँ तक पढ़े हो?
हम.
This is my, you know what, by the way, before we start this thing, this is my favoriteest bad joke. कि कोई किसी से पूछता है कहाँ तक पढ़े हो and then the other person is like 5 बजे तक या 2 बजे तक या दोपहर तक.
This is very old. This is मतलब संटा वंटा से भी old joke.
Yeah, but this works every time. मेरे को हमेशा हंसी आती है every time says this कि कहाँ तक पढ़े हो? 2 बजे तक.
Isn't this joke? What is the origin of this joke? This is from Khichdi, the movie. I remember now.
Yeah, this I've seen a lot of movies, yaar. So yes, we are going to talk about education, and specifically, we want to talk about कि यार, what is happening to our education system and what is happening to our kids, because 2 examples are right in front of you that good education is so important in a child's development. Otherwise, they turn out like Anjani and me.
Please. ये self-depreciating jokes मेरे नहीं है, पहले बता रही हूँ. But okay, Prateek, how would you rate your education? Like, how satisfied are you with whatever education you've gotten?
Yaar, I would say that I am not the most educated person in the room. Like, even I am just a graduate, which is the bare minimum आज की date में कहते हैं. But the amount of education, and not even education, but learning that I've gotten outside of my classes has like made all the difference when it comes to whatever I am today. Because technically अगर देखा जाए कायदे से, I am not supposed to be sitting right here recording a podcast. I was supposed to be an engineer working on some chemical engineering company making chemicals and making दवाइयाँ या कुछ बना रहा होता मैं. If I would have had education, अगर मैं अपनी education के साथ गया होता. But I think it's a happy accident that happened in my life कि education से ज़्यादा मैंने learning पे focus करा in different parts in my life through sports and extracurriculars, theatre, music, film, etc. And that I think has made me learn a lot, I would say. What about you?
Were you like a straight A student?
Oh no, not at all. I was the straight A students. Bottom, जो जिसे कहते हैं ना, barely pass वाले students used to consider me straight A's.
Okay.
And the पढ़ाकू बच्चे used to call me आवारा.
So right in the middle.
So I was the exact middle of it. But what was your schooling like?
So
How was it 2 years ago?
that was my college. I don't consider that my schooling. So my schooling, I was a straight A kid.
Seriously? You actually look like that.
Yeah.
Love. This I want to just tell my listeners, the credit for all the research that we do on The Big Story goes to straight A Anjali.
Oh, that's a nice alliteration. Straight A Anjali. I like it. But no, so it was like I was a weird combination of book smart plus street smart kid.
So smart.
Yeah, so just smart in general. So So I used to get good marks, but I did not study for it. So इसीलिए मुझे काफ़ी मुझे गालियाँ भी पड़ती थी इस चीज़ के लिए कि तू पढ़ती नहीं है पर मार्क्स क्यों आ जाते
Yeah, पढ़नी भी चाहिए.
It was because I never really took studying as, you know, a बैठ के पढ़ने वाला concept. And fortunately my schooling did give me exposure to other things also.
Yeah.
But I was not as outgoing. I obviously, like a lot of people, put a lot of importance, gave marks importance because I knew कि अच्छा college admission वाले के point of view से but I never stressed about it. I mean, maybe it's थोड़ा privileged कि मुझे मिल जाते थे इसीलिए I did not stress about it. But what I realized, like I have seen people from my school who I used to think score much better marks than me, so you know will go much further in life, and who did not do as well as I did or other kids, and thought मतलब maybe not.
अंजलि के दोस्तों, you know, I just want to point out कि अंजलि आपको अभी भारी जज कर रही है, so comments में तैयार रहें. She's calling you unsuccessful. She's like, you haven't made it in life.
I did not. Let me complete my point. My point was that after a point I felt कि it really did not matter what school you went to. So till my 10th grade, I was not in the best school in my city. There were much better schools in my city. And so I always felt, okay, am I missing out on something? But right now I feel like it, you know, not being in those schools also had its own merits, me being in a much smaller school for that matter. Okay, so there's always this thing. After I changed my school in 10th grade, whenever you go to a new institution, you know, right before you start, you have like this, because they sell you that idea. Okay, this is what you're going to learn. This is going to be so amazing.
Yeah.
Even with college, you know, I went to a great college.
So why did you change your school after 10th? मतलब was there a specific
I
reason?
didn't change my school. मतलब it was like 11th, 12th, मेरे school में सिर्फ science था and I didn't want to do science.
Oh, अच्छा.
So I had to go to another school.
हमारे यहाँ का there was a very different thing because you talk about changing schools after 10th. So I live in the Delhi UP border and my school till 10th was in Ghaziabad, which is in UP, है ना? And just border cross करके there is a slew of line लगी होती है schools की, which are considered very good DAV, DPS type schools. And every year, every batch में after 10th, there is like a mass migration of people from UP to Delhi. Guess why?
Why?
Because apparently, I still, मतलब मेरे को 10 से 15 साल हो चुका है I think स्कूल छोड़े हुए. I still don't know if it is true or not. बस 12वीं अगर तुम दिल्ली से करो तो दिल्ली के engineering colleges में you get a 15% का you know benefit or something like that. और उस एक चीज के चक्कर में मतलब साइंस सेक्शन खाली हो जाता था पूरा 10वीं के बाद जो यूपी वाला स्कूल है. एंड ऑल माय फ्रेंड्स यूज्ड टू बी they would join me in the Delhi
enrolled in
schools.
Delhi ke schools. Oh my god. But I think enough about our schooling. Let's talk about what this episode is about, which is about how we view education, and because it is called a problem of India because we have the largest youth in the world,
which is so sad. Matlab, it's not a system, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's something that we have to fix.
And I think even when we were deciding on the topic and when we were developing this, I think one question that came एकदम अंदर से was कि ये हो क्यों रहा है and who is to blame for this. मतलब क्या किसकी गलती है ये, मतलब क्या प्रिंसिपल्स और स्कूल के लोग अच्छा नहीं पढ़ा रहे या बच्चे ही एकदम नालायक हैं या यू नो एनवायरनमेंट नहीं है या गवर्नमेंट कुछ नहीं कर रही. हु इज द वेयर डज द बक स्टॉप इन दिस? एंड आई थिंक दैट इज वेयर वी वुड वांट टू start this conversation with that. First of all, understand this problem, understand the gamut of this problem, and understand ki who do we ask questions of and who can do something about it. And for that we have two amazing guests with us today.
And the first one is Neeti Bhalla Saini, who is the executive principal at Satya School in Gurgaon, and she has previously worked with a lot of state government schools, especially in the Delhi NCR area, to get the international baccalaureate, that is the IB board's curriculum, into these schools in the primary year programs. And she's been in this field for 18 years, and she's a consultant from the international baccalaureate board. is it called we call it IB board, so I think it's International Baccalaureate Board.
IB board. IB. I used to think it's IB का मतलब international board.
Same, and it used to be a thing where IB board में कौन बच्चे जाते हैं जिन्हें बैचलर्स के लिए इंडिया के बाहर जाना है, वो IB board में जाते हैं.
हैं ऐसा होता है. हमारा होता था engineering में this thing used to be कि 12th तक you can't use calculators, right? But apparently in the IB board you can, the scientific calculators. तो engineering का first year आधा साल हम सबको calculator सीखने में ही लगता था. And all of these IB boards के बच्चे, they used to be like, हाँ मैं तो ग्राफ भी बना सकता हूँ अपने इसमें, I can do differentiation, integration. I'm like, bro,
ये सही चीज़ है.
ये सही है यार. So yes, we were talking about our first guest, Neeti Bhalla, and with her we have Ratna Vishwanathan from Reach to Teach. It's a social impact organization and they work with a lot of state governments to improve the standard of education. And I think ये जो हमारा panel है ना अंजलि, not to toot our own horns, but this panel is really interesting because one side we have Neeti, who is from an IB background and she works with these private schools and a lot of these economically well-off education systems and boards and principals and all, with a lot of resources. And on the other hand, we have Ratna, who has worked with a lot of state governments. And I won't say that state governments have less resources. I think they have limited resources and they have to
and they have
make
a
do
different
with,
set of challenges.
Yeah. So काफी मतलब मुझे लगता है मजा आने वाला है हमारे listeners को कि यार एजुकेशन की प्रॉब्लम पे एक प्राइवेट स्कूल का रिप्रेजेंटेटिव कहना सही नहीं होगा, बट प्राइवेट स्कूल का पर्सन एंड पब्लिक एजुकेशन सिस्टम का पर्सन, और उसके बीच में हम करेंगे डिबेट और बहस और ठड़म ठड़म. Just kidding, guys. It's not going to be a debate. We are going to have like a nice, achhi,
civil discussion.
Yes.
Although I cannot guarantee that Pratik will not try to incite a debate.
Oh, 100%. 100%. But no. So Anjali, चलिए शुरू करते हैं.
Hello and welcome to the podcast, Neeti and Ratna. It's great to
Hello,
have you.
Neeti. Hello, Ratna.
Hi, guys.
How are you? We were talking to the both of you offline, and the first thing that really struck my curiosity is what is your philosophy of education in general? What does education mean to you? If anybody would like to start. Ratna first.
So for me, education is two main things. One is empathy and the other is joy. Because for me, without empathy and without joy, there's not much learning that's happening. That's exactly why I think we end up with rote learning. That is why we end up with joyless learning, with low understanding. Because unless you're having fun, and I think fun is key to anything in life, right? So for me, yes, what education means, irrespective of where it is, whether it's in the private space, whether it's in the government space, whether it is in this little horrendous mid-level, small budget, private school space, which really needs a lot of re-looking at, joy is essential. So that's what education means to me.
Oh, that's amazing, Ratna. So for me, education is being a lifelong learner, that you continue to learn, and what you learn, you enjoy that. It's not about knowing your maths and literacy, like what you said. It's just not that. It is being able to learn and then apply in your life. And I have these constant conversations at home also, that who's truly educated? A person who can apply what they've learned, not a person who has degrees and multiple degrees. Education truly means being a lifelong learner, continuing to learn and unlearn what you knew and then learn again, relearn. And while you do that, have that joy of learning. Yeah, that's what education is truly.
So both of you have this concept of joy, but like, just personally speaking, I don't think joy was something that I felt when I was
throughout your 12 years of...
I'll ask you a very simple question. Okay? Like when you walked into the classroom and you met a friend, somebody in your class that you really liked, you didn't feel joy.
Yeah.
You went into the sports field and jumped around in the grass and ran all over the place.
Yeah.
Did you not feel joy? Did you need gizmos and things to make you happy. No.
I think it's also just being content with what you have and how you can utilize it in your everyday life. I mean, I'm sure you felt joy in that one particular teacher's class.
Yeah.
Who made things easy for you, who made things interesting for you. It could have
Everybody has that one teacher's face in our minds, right?
it could have been that very boring social studies. I mean, nothing against that. I love history and geography, but it could have been, I mean, teachers tend to make it, and I am a teacher by heart, so I know how we tend to make things boring and subjects very boring. I mean, that one teacher would have created so much joy in that class, enacting some historical moment that is what joy is. And I'm sure both of you can put your hands on your heart and say we felt that joy once.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
Yes.
The fact that you miss it when you are out of school is a testament to the joy that we felt.
Yeah.
But since we're already hit a philosophical note on this, what do you think is the purpose of the 12 years of schooling that we go through?
See, I'm not a teacher, unlike Neeti, but speaking completely from a layperson's perspective, I think the reason you put structures around things is more to be able to control the environment, right?
Mhm.
There is no given. There are any number of people who are homeschooled who do
Right.
brilliantly well in life because whatever they have learned to apply it. They haven't learned for the sake of learning. Now, because we are so stuck in our heads that our children need to know. Now, what they need to do beyond need to know, I'm not bothered about. As a parent, I'm like, tuition bhej do. 100% आना चाहिए. That one son got 80%. Who the hell cares? But parents do. And to completely blame the education system all the time, saying you drive rote learning, you drive this, it's a two-way street. It's not just being done by the schooling system, it's also parents who are equally crazy, maybe because that's the way they came up, right? But there are any number of instances of very bright people who've dropped out midway, who've done excellently. So I think as human beings, we like a framework because it makes us feel secure. It makes us feel in control. And it makes us feel, see, within this, हम ये कर सकते हैं. Beyond that, I'm a little scared. Where am I going with this? And this is completely Neeti from a layperson's perspective.
No, that's really interesting perspective, and that's a wonderful way of putting it through. But I also have a little different take on it. I think the whole 12 years, or not 12, but it's 15 because you're also looking at early childhood of schooling is a lot about building skills and developing skills. Originally in our education system, when we go way back to the Gurukul system, what were we doing? We were actually building skills, and that somewhere got lost in the Indian education system. And then with a lot of educators coming together, working around it, studying it and redrafting it, came in the new education policy. And new education policy hugely talks about the 21st century skills and how they need to be developed. So since I've been with the IB for a longer time, and IB has always focused on developing skills in students. It is important to get marks, but it is far, far more important to develop a skill. So I may differ a little from what Ratna said, that a student who is homeschooled also does equally well, is successful. I think there's a very, definition of success is very varied from person to person, individual to individual. For some people, success is being able to earn a lot of money. For some people, success is that what they do, they are content in that work. So when we go back to building skills, and a child who's being homeschooled, they do miss out on certain skills which would have been developed while they were in school. I love this quote by Margaret Mead, which says that children must be taught how to think. They should not be given what to think, but they should be taught how to think. So thinking skill is so missing in our curriculum and even in our daily lives. So I agree on that part where Ratna says that it's the home that drives it. We spell out everything, right from the time they get up to the time they go to school and come back. Get up, brush your teeth, do this, have your breakfast, pack your bag. So when they go to school also, they are in that same, and that's where rote learning emerges. That when you're not thinking, the convenient way is rote learning. Then the convenient way is to learn everything and write it and reproduce it on a piece of paper.
Also, Niti, do you think that in a country like India, education and schooling is seen as a way to employment? and to like get a lot of people out of poverty. And that is why this whole mindset of rote learning and Marx law or ye sab becomes so much more prevalent.
See, India is the youngest nation. If you look at the number of youngsters who are there, and if they are not educated, of course the problems will come in. But do we really need them to be educated only in terms of putting in and bringing in marks, or do we want them educated in terms of skills as well? Why are we not producing and strengthening the programs where they can go into a more skilled and vocational training and become stronger and excel in those fields? So it is important that we have an educated, more than educated idea, educated and not just degree
holding
generation, but educated one. It is
Ratna, you were
Ratna.
saying.
Yes, so I work completely, entirely with government schools.
Yeah.
But I come from a private schooling system and a very privileged private schooling system. So I know what I had access to, right? And I see what these children have access to. So when we talk about Marx, rote learning, etc., for first generation learners, they don't know any different, right? 50% of your country goes to government schools, of which 84% is rural India. From that 58%, right? Now, those parents, their children are first generation learners. And we as a society, and we as educators, and we as people who are the ones who create these curriculums and syllabi and frameworks, are completely under the assumption that parents from low-income households will not add value to their children and do not involve them in anything when the first learning environment of a child is the home. And also, secondly, the mind of a child develops between the ages of 3 and 11, where a large part of it is spent at home. So by pushing this particular segment out of the learning framework, you're actually doing more harm than good. Number one, you make parents feel that, they are not suited to be part of the engagement with their children, puts them at a disadvantage because they're constantly feeling the child knows more. But then they have one quantifiable parameter in their head, right? Marks, because that they understand clearly. So what do you do? And when we're talking of skilling, Niti, classes 6 to 12, there is vocational skill in the syllabus, but you don't have financial literacy. Now, without financial literacy, just having a vocational skill means nothing, because I can never be an entrepreneur, and I'm the youngest country in the world, and I'm producing more job seekers than job creators. That's one. Two, much more importantly, what is the level of, employability when I skill? I know for a fact that the skilling that is done by the National Skill Development Council, you go and do employability indicators of a large part of the people who've gone through skilling processes. They are not employable.
Do you agree with this, Niti?
No, I completely agree with it. Absolutely. There is no denying what Ratna is saying.
Yeah.
And the whole crux of it also lies, and I'm sure Ratna would agree with, is teachers who are dealing with them. The professional development of the teachers. Because the teachers who are teaching them, they can teach them a lot of things. However, they are not able to, for various reasons. Ratna works very closely with government schools, but when I stand outside and when I look at how it's happening, there are some amazing and very talented teachers in government schools, and there are other teachers who are not ready to learn. And that's the same scenario even in private schools. In private schools, they don't have much choice because they are forced, and it's kind of forced down that you have to learn and you have to transform. But it is so important that if you want that generation of what Ratna is talking about, the 58% who goes to the government schools, you need to have better teachers. You need to have better teacher training programs and empowered teachers who can implement some bits of the curriculum to the students, not just only for marks, but a little much better curriculum for them.
In fact, Niti, to come in here, one of the things we focus on, and it's critical to our work, is the central point of our work, is restoring teacher agency in government schools. Right? Because what was your best subject? The teacher that you liked the best That was a big
Yeah.
subject. When you went into school, you had no idea this is English, this is math,
Yeah.
this is history.
Yeah. We were just talking about the
The favorite
favorite teachers
teachers,
and the most
absolutely.
joyous
So
teachers.
it has to be the teacher, because unless the teacher wants, see, we keep saying child at the center. The child at the center is a lost case. Okay, it's the environment, it's the parents,
Interesting.
it's the teachers, it's the home, it's community around that actually creates the space for that child to learn, right? So then, who is the point of contact that actually gives the largest number of hours in teaching that child? It's
The
the
teacher. Yeah.
Who knows the child better than anybody else?
It's the teacher. Yeah.
Yet it's that same
Yeah.
teacher who's not consulted for curriculum, who's not consulted for syllabus. 100 people come to them, private agencies, government agencies, asking for all kinds of data. Nobody ever bothers to go back to them to say why they collected that
And what
data
did they do with it?
and what they did with it. And that's the biggest. They say we get exhausted giving data and we don't even know
That is
why
true.
we're giving this data. So unless to restore teacher agency, I don't think children will learn. Teachers have to be given that
And I think that is one difference between a government school and a private school. And I wouldn't say all private schools, but a lot of progressive private schools are giving agency to teachers. So for us, it is very important that if teachers are given the agency, they will give agency to students. Students will have ownership of their learning. That is how it works for them.
So when you say teachers should be given more agency, what exactly do you guys mean?
So
See, okay, you go ahead.
Okay, all right. Thanks. So when we talk about teacher agency, we talk about teachers taking ownership of what they want to do, what they want to teach, how they want to teach, and when they want to teach.
You have, of course, the overall, at the back end, you have the universal construct of syllabus, curriculum, etc. But there is nothing that stops you from within that same curriculum or within that same syllabus devising lessons in a manner you know your children, right? That they will be able to absorb it in the best possible way. There are, parameters to check whether they are on the same, lesson planning. There is a diary which they have to take, and a lot of manual drudgery that goes into their daily work. You talk about head teachers. Head teachers are supposed to be school leaders, right? They're supposed to develop other teachers. They're supposed to look at classroom observations. They're supposed to look at school governance. What do they end up doing? Salary pay karo, electricity bill bharo. Acha, ye ho raha hai. Look, now the leadership to forget. Basically, how do I, strengthen the teachers in my school?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about, let's say, rote learning, or we're talking about there being a set syllabus, there being a set curriculum, do you think a lot of this is the way it is because it is quantifiable that way, and at the end of the day you can go to the parent and present it in numbers, in marks and stuff like that? Or in the absence of such a system, wouldn't it be too difficult for the school to present to the parents, this is what your child has learned? Is that why a system is like that?
And in general, adding to that, why, like, how did we come at this situation? Like, what's the history of all of this, and what do you think are the reasons for all of the problems that you guys highlighted?
Would you like to talk about the white man's problem of where it came from?
I will. No, I really want to. That's an interesting, very, very interesting question. But I think the point that is here is that it's an easier way to be able to quantify something than to qualify it. So if you're given a curriculum that you have to teach, it's very easy for me. I will just copy, paste and do that. And like I said in one of my, the quote by Margaret Mead, that you're not telling the teachers to think. You're telling them what to think. So they're easy and they don't want to rack their brains, and nobody wants to. None of us would want to do that. I think this system, I remember as a child when I went to school, I had some amazing teachers. And my father, by the way, I come from a family of teachers. My father was a teacher at Doon School and my mom was a teacher later on. So I come from a family of teachers, and I grew up on that campus, that amazing campus, which had all my father's colleagues, and they were all teachers. I saw a very different form of teaching. For me, that is what was teaching, that teachers did not sit in the classrooms and taught students. So somewhere from the 80s, before that, the system was there where there were more creative ways. marks were, of course, focused, but not that big a focus. I think somewhere in the 90s and 2000s is when the marks became such a big focus, and everybody was like running after marks, that nothing mattered to a teacher. I mean, 60% in my times, I don't sound too ancient. I don't want to sound too ancient, but Ratna would agree that 60% and getting a first division was a huge deal.
Yeah.
The family celebrated if you got a 65%.
As soon as
Hardly
you said
anybody
60%, I
got-
could already imagine my parents like yelling, just
ये
60%.
क्या marks
yeah.
है?
I'm already judging you guys for 60%.
The moment you cross 60, like, it's a big deal. But I think it's also, it's a supply demand issue with the number of, higher education institutions we have and the demand on the number of higher education institutions we have. It's only recently the whole privatization has happened. More agencies have been allowed to come in, etc. And the whole aim was to get into government colleges. And one of the reasons for getting into government colleges was affordability, because higher education is an expensive space. And then when demand outstrips supply, there had to be, I guess, a quantity. And it's like you said, over the last 10, 15 years, it's been horrifying. My daughter had 100% in psychology and history. I wanted to kill myself. How can anyone get 100% in history and psychology?
And in English, I've seen children getting 100
It's
in English. I mean,
unbelievable.
I can't believe
And
it.
the cutoffs were at 100%. I'm like, are you creating children or is this a joke? Right? The whole system is chaotic. And I think there is the need to rationalize all of this mad race, and have alternate ways of getting higher education rather than just fighting for those institutions that exist and creating these completely false cutoff parameters, because you're not really being fair to the child. Where are you being fair to the child? A very smart child who got 98%, you're really playing with the emotions of the child, the self-esteem of that child. And that child starts feeling less when they're not, right?
Yeah, that's what my question to all these higher education, the tertiary education level is, that a child who gets a 99% because your cutoff is 99 is good enough, and a child who's 98.5 is not good enough. I mean, what are you trying to tell? Come on, what are you telling that child? Every now and then you open the newspaper, you see the news, and you hear that a class 12th child jumped off the place or did this, did that. It's so heartbreaking. I mean, for what?
And also, I think somewhere we should encourage, alternate education. Like my child went to a school called Mirambika. Till class 8, they had no exams. And there's some 13 kids to a class. And when the rest of the world was doing, class year-end exams, school was taking off to some ashram in Ramgarh in Nainital, or they had some place called Kechla in Orissa, which was like a little island where they went and taught village school kids, right? And they had the time of their lives. And yet, all those kids, after the 8th, they graduate to, regular schools. They've all done very well because they didn't learn linear.
Yeah.
They learned spatial, right? So the ability to apply was given far more importance than just learning Hindi, English, maths. You wanted to understand a law in physics, you were walked across to IIT and you saw it visually.
Yeah.
You're never going to forget it.
Wow.
Right? And when I talk about frugal innovation, Neeti, you don't need the big stuff.
Absolutely.
It's what's in front of you, what you can use to demonstrate. Like, somebody I was talking to, they said, give a child a seed.
Yeah.
Ask the child to plant it in a little pot and take a picture every day with a regular phone.
Yes.
Next 8 to 10 days. Learning, excitement, joy, growing, technology, all together. Not cost intensive. Right? So it's how we use what we use and the way we use it that actually leads to learning.
And with NEP, that is exactly what they are talking about, that the children need to be able to experience what they are doing and move away from rote learning. However, I will again come back to the point, are the teachers ready to implement that curriculum? They are not yet ready. And so we may write hundreds of documents, we may write anything, but till the time we don't focus on our teachers, we don't focus on training them and upskilling them, we will never be able to implement the beautiful documents that we keep producing
So how
somewhere in those big rooms.
How will something like this happen? How will training the teachers happen?
From the government school perspective, now most government schools teachers are very apathetic. They are so not used to having agency that they stop bothering after a point, because at the end of the day, they're government employees. They will be paid. They will get a salary. They don't really have to care, right? There is nothing being pegged.
They're disconnected from.
I will not say they're disconnected. No.
Okay.
They're apathetic because of the fact that nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the same teachers, and this is what we're doing right now. We are working with teachers and children to bring life back into the study. So what are we doing? We're not touching curriculum. We're not touching syllabus. All we're doing is we've taken the content, right? And infusing that content with experiential and activity elements. Now, the moment we've done that, there's something for the teacher to do. And there's something for the child.
Can you
to
give an
do.
example, Ratna?
Yeah, so for instance, let us say learning about leaves, right? I walk around, pick up leaves, come back to the classroom, and then we sit together, hold up a leaf, show me what leaf you've picked up. That is a compound leaf. That is a variegated leaf, right? That is a simple leaf. You're watching, you picked it up, you held it,
Yeah.
right? And none of you are forgetting. And
Yeah.
the teacher is equally excited because it's different leaves, not something stuck in a textbook.
Yeah, because every day you will find different, every season you will find different
Different
leaves.
things. And what we're doing is we're doing very, very, detailed teacher notes. It's almost like a do-it-yourself. 1, 2, 3 to support the activity. The learning to hai hi, and the content hai. But that activity needs to be supported because there is a reason to that activity that it leads to a learning outcome. And we find, strangely enough, that teachers now, you see, play is something the human being loves. No matter why do people who are 45 and 50 do management games? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Play, everybody loves. So the moment there's an element of things to do, see, hear, feel, there's excitement on both ends. And there's also joy because there's something fun happening and you're learning.
This reminds me, in a lot of our science, math textbooks for that matter, at the end of the lesson, there used to be like a small box of activity. But I can't remember doing any of them.
We were told to skip that.
Yeah, because now lesson is over. We rarely ever did those activities. There were these little boxes. I can distinctly remember that said activity.
Yeah. There was a bulb
Yeah.
made on top. ऐसा animation कुछ था. उसमें लिखा होता था try these exercises.
Yeah.
And we were conveniently told to skip to the questions and exercises wala page.
And I'm guessing all of these used to be these things only.
And they would be super fun, I'm assuming. Yeah.
But also, just adding to what Ratna said, I think it is very important that the teachers who are with us, we have the B.Ed exam, we have the CTET and the NTET and all those things that the teachers are appearing for. What after that? Once you're done, you're done. And then you're a teacher for life. I think there has to be a system that all teachers need to get teaching licenses. Way back in the 90s, people who didn't do anything became teachers. It's unfortunate thing for me to say that and say it like up loud that kuch nahi kiya, ladki badi ho gayi hai, she's done her graduation, post-graduation, B.Ed to kar hi lo. And that is what the saddest part is, that so many of the people who became teachers actually didn't want to be teachers. And I feel that if you are truly feel and if you are passionate about a thing, that's when you should get into it. Otherwise, get off the bus and do something else that you're passionate about. So many people took B.Ed degrees. I mean, Annamalai and all these places were randomly distributing and prasad mein baant rahe the degrees to everybody. And everybody whosoever came in was a teacher. I meet so many teachers and I interview them and I just think that why the hell did this person become a teacher?
Do you also go through this, Ratna? Talking to teachers and
Look, teaching is a job like any other, right? Now, there are two ways of looking at it. A lot of us get into something we want to do out of passion. But to be honest, in a country like ours, with the kind of population we have, passion is a luxury, right? There is a lot of people who need it as a job. A lot of them later on, when they do the work, fall in love with the work.
yeah.
That's different. It's not like they may come into it as a job, but then they actually fall in love with it and do it.
It's like an arranged marriage. कि पहले शादी कर लो फिर प्यार हो जाएगा.
I will not even walk that route right now. But be honest, so the problem doesn't lie with the teachers. I think it's our approach to teachers. One of the biggest problems that faces government Niti is you have what are called these teacher education institutes.
Okay.
A lot of them don't even exist. They're on paper, right?
Mhm.
And we were tasked by one state government to actually create a format to help them sift out whether those institutes really existed, right? Because and then you pay money, like you say, prashad mein bant raha hai. Yeah, you just they get a certificate and they come and say, see, humne teacher education kar liya. So if you put those through a test again, I would be horrified at the results that would come out.
Also, a question that Prateek had asked, that why do you think that teaching, and where did it really start changing and started going bad, or whichever way he had asked that question, I think was also when I go back to looking at my dad. When he was a teacher, he became a teacher by choice. He didn't become a teacher because he didn't want to do. He wanted to be a teacher. And a lot of people in the 70s and the 60s and the 50s became teachers because that was their passion and they wanted to become teachers. Then came in the 80s, people were still looking at 90s, 2000, even now. I mean, people become teachers just because they don't want to do other things. I remember when I became a teacher, I was just 21 and I had finished my graduation, and my mom said, get into teaching. And I did that for a year, and I said, no, I don't want to be a teacher. Both my parents are teachers. Doesn't mean that I'll be a teacher. It's not something genetic that has been passed on to me. I was like, kya, mommy has said, and dad has said, okay, let me try it and let me do it. Girls should be teachers, that kind.
Yeah.
And I wanted to break that. But I realized that that's what I did best. So
That's a love marriage.
yeah. No, it was arranged.
I need to have a conversation with you after this.
That was also kind of arranged. I was into that, pushed into it. but yeah, so people need to be passionate, and I agree with Ratna when she says that it's a luxury. Passion is a luxury. But can we have little more compassion, if not compassion from teachers who are teaching the students? Because
Compassion shouldn't be a luxury.
yeah, that shouldn't be a luxury. Because every profession that you are looking at deals with products, deals with humans, deals with this and that. Teaching deals with children.
Yeah.
And when we look at children, we say children are tomorrow's nation. They're tomorrow's leaders. What are we talking about if we are not empowering our teachers to take that step to nurture those individuals? 3 साल का बच्चा जब स्कूल में आता है, it's the teacher who's the god for that child. I mean, parents call the teachers and say, ma'am, my child doesn't listen to me. Why don't you tell her to do this? Why don't you tell him to do that? That's the value a teacher has in the life of a child, a young child.
I have an anecdote. My sister wouldn't eat her vegetables in her tiffin. So my mom told me to tell her teacher कि ये सब्जी नहीं खाती. So this is how much trust we have on our teacher.
There is the other extreme, where the teacher says something which is incorrect, and you tell the child, this is not the correct answer. No, mistake. It is correct.
Do you also think like the reverse happen, where people with a lot of passion for teaching do get into it, and then eventually, like we've pointed out all the troubles of being a teacher in our education system, then get out of it even though they do have the passion? Does that happen?
Or become that mechanized version of a teacher.
No, anybody who is passionate, they will keep fighting.
They will fight.
They will keep fighting. They will keep trying to do something, however small, on a daily basis to make something better, because it comes from within.
And the fight is, for them, the fight is not with education or teaching. The fight is with the system, with the institute they are working with. So they may leave that institute, they may leave that system, but they'll continue to be passionate teachers.
Okay, so we were, Ratna, I think you had touched upon alternate methods of learning, right? Now, first of all, I have a question. What are those methods? For our listeners who are young parents and people who might be in schools currently, what are, number one, those kind of systems? And another question that I had was, when we talk about these alternate methods of learning, is there an apprehension that you guys face कि यार इससे result पे फर्क पड़ेगा, अगर हम ये सब करेंगे तो इससे रिजल्ट पे why should we waste
You
time
know, it's,
पत्ते वत्ते उनको दिखा रहे हो और ये सब कर रहे हो.
it's interesting you're asking me this question, because when I put my daughter into Mirambika, that was the question I was asked. Are you sure that is where you want that child to go? Can you not
Asked
see
by who?
other parents, my friends,
Other
colleagues? I
parents,
mean,
okay.
I was a civil servant, competitive as hell, right? So
Yeah.
then, like, aren't you scared that your child will not be able to compete? I said, the school I went to, we were taught that excellence is only with self, and you only need to excel with yourself. So I am not bothered about whether my child can compete with the outside world, as long as she develops the strength, the courage, and the understanding that she is very good at what she does. The moment she has that within her, that resilience and that self confidence, learning is not hard. I mean, she did very well. She went to Mother, she went to Stephen, she went to Micah. I mean, she did very well. And she did not follow.
Now, I'm curious, Ratna, what does your daughter do now?
She works with advertising. With 2 civil service parents, she didn't want to be a civil servant. So she works with advertising.
But what she had through that schooling in her life was the joy of learning. What Ratna said in the beginning,
absolute
and that
joy.
happiness. And that's what made her do things in a different manner. And that's what helped her to succeed. So joy of learning helps there.
Exactly. Because of the fact that she had joyful learning, she's so intense. She's so passionate about whatever she does. And she has these things like she drives herself. And I think one of the things we as parents also make a mistake. The moment you go after children, padho, homework karo, I will do your project for you. What you end up doing is removing the responsibility from the child and taking it onto yourself. So the child says, okay, mummy ne bola nahi na, aake boli ki tab padhne baithogi, tab tak let me just chill, right? Now, the moment you do this, you've actually disempowered the child. And I remember very clearly telling my daughter, Papa's done whatever he had to. I have done whatever I had to. Now it's up to you.
Yeah.
You want to do, domestic work, your call. You want to go paint houses, your call.
With no
Your
judgments.
call alone. And
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever sat down and told her to do homework. Forget touching up projects, not by any long, I had no clue what project she had. And I think she did pretty well because the responsibility was hers. I remember when 10th standard exams were happening, Neeti, a lot of people took away their children's phones, cut off
Yeah.
internet connections. I did nothing of the sort. She did extremely well.
So now that we're at this point, I think this is what we were going to talk about. Next is, how has parents' involvement or their relationship with schools changed over the years? We can, I think for sure, say they are way more involved than they used to be. And we see it in the form of, parents' associations in schools.
Also, how does it differ between like a private setting and a...
Yeah.
I'll take the private school one. I think it's good to have parent involvement, but overindulgence is never good. And somewhere the parents need to realize that there is a thin line being involved in what your child is doing, being overindulgent. It's kind of a guilt that they feel that probably their parents weren't enough indulgent on them or over-involved, that I want to be over-involved. So I'll just take very live example of my school. What we want our parents to do is be involved in the life of the child, know what your child is doing, and offer your services to the school in terms of your expertise. So if you are from a certain field, come and talk to the other children about that field. That's how we want parents to be involved, because they are our equal stakeholders. Come and talk to us what your child is going through, and we want to figure out ways and means to sort those problems. We don't want, being overprotective about the child actually loses the child to be resilient. Choti si baat hoti hai, the child goes crying back home and the parent wants to take immediate action. That friend didn't suit my child, that group doesn't suit my child, change the class, change the section,
change the seat.
Starts from right from there. That let your child learn to fight his or her own small classroom battles. That is what will make them resilient and strong individuals. However, it is important that you know what your child is doing and how your child is progressing, and have those open conversations with the teachers and go back to the schools.
Neeti, I honestly feel sometimes in private schools, parents somehow have this attitude that, you know what, you teachers, we pay you guys, you better do your job. And that somehow removes respect from the child towards the teacher, which I think is the greatest tragedy, because the child has to have respect for the teacher. And half the reason, teachers are angry or upset is because they're like, I am the teacher, I know what I want, and I have a parent coming and yelling at me just because I pulled up a child for doing something the child shouldn't have done. Now, those are things that somehow have crept into the system, and even more so because, when you have both working parents, that burden of guilt that, oh my God, we both working, we're not giving quality time to the child. That's not correct. I've worked all my life and I know I've given enough quality time to the child. So who do I take it out on? I find alibis, right? And I find external agencies to project it on. And who is the most obvious agency? It's the teacher, right? So it's your job.
Because the child is spending so much time. And also the child is spending so much time in the school. So that's where, so it comes back around there. So if the parent and the teacher could work collaboratively, that is where more patience is required from the parents' side, and more trust is required. That if they have trusted a space for their child to go to and learn, then let's have that patience to say that what is that person telling us about the child and how is that person responding to the child's needs.
And the flip side is parents from low-income households, because they feel they don't know enough. They're already mortified by the thought of walking into a formal education atmosphere. So
for a lot of places, I'm assuming it's the first time somebody from the generation
a lot of them are first generation learners. So they're almost, like supplicant to the teachers. They feel that they know, we don't know. Somewhere that gap needs to be bridged too. We actually have two very diverse ends of the spectrum. One of entitlement and the other of completely being scared and mortified of a formal, learning setting.
Yeah. So I have a question that tab se abhi tak all the points that we have touched on. Ratna, you've been, talking about the government side of the things, and Neeti, you're talking about the private education side of it. I want to understand, what is the difference between government education and private education? Is it just about affordability and money? And in general, farak kya hota hai dono mein?
See, the government has to provide services as a welfare state, right? But there is definitely we are a very large population, right? There is a limit to what is available in terms of a budget, right? We don't have the wherewithal. I'm sure, I don't think anybody, if they had the money and had the wherewithal, would be averse to creating similar conditions that private schools have. But
Absolutely.
It's about juggling resources, because you have to build infrastructure everywhere.
And for such a large population. Exactly. For such a large population.
And school is one part of that infrastructure. So it's also, there are so many forces at play. But we also have to look at the fact that the government does provide a huge number of schools to cater to a very large population, right? So somewhere that balance between numbers, availability of budgets, and infrastructure creates the kind of, stresses and strains around government schooling systems and government education. Having said that, in a state like Haryana, for example, they have created model schools. And they're slowly upscaling. They started with a few and then a few more. And then, like today, there are about 138. They're doing a hub and spoke model. You go to any of these government schools, they're pure government schools. It's beautiful. They have labs. They have great libraries. The way they've used the entire campus for, teaching aids, like on the walls, on the little stones that pave, kiaris. They've used the entire school as teaching aids, right? You have confident young children there. That's a government school as well. So a lot also depends on the state, the availability of budget. It's a concurrent subject. So the wherewithal for the budget lies with the state, right?
And it's the same thing in Delhi schools also. You look at the Delhi government schools, the Delhi Board of School Education, what they're doing and how they're trying to transform those schools. I mean, so much so they're trying to also bring in an international curriculum so that the teaching learning practices become better. They have put in a lot of resources on teachers' development. So they took in from Finnish curriculum, from various curriculums, and they have trained teachers. And it is really true. I mean, I've seen that work, and I see it closely because I work with 3-4 of their government schools there as an IB, from the IB perspective, from the IB side as a consultant. And they're trying to do a lot of things there. Of course, their challenges are huge. Like while it was lockdown and online learning, they didn't have devices. The students didn't have devices where they came from the background. And like Ratna says that, their parents are not as educated. They are their first time probably learners, the first generation learners these students are. So the parents also don't have an understanding and wherewithal of saying how my child should learn and what my child should learn. So there are huge challenges, but having said that, within those challenges also, some of the governments are trying to bring in a difference to the schools.
There's no lack of intent, Pratik. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
Right? There are.
Would you say that? Would you actually say that there is actually work being done?
There is a lot of work being done. Oh, yes, at different levels, which is why like I told you have different boards. You have different, what should I say? Courses. You have the ICSE, you have the CBSE, you have the government
state boards
of a particular state.
State boards as well.
And then different syllabi, different curriculum. But so obviously there's a lot of work happening. Otherwise, it would all be defunct. And it's not that we're running as a Ram Bharose country. There is a lot of structure. There is a lot of work happening. It's just that the sheer numbers and
that
the
work
inertia that numbers breed sometimes reflects on quality. And that I think is the biggest bane, which is where the National Education Policy 2020, if it can actually be brought down into doable bits and pieces
and explained better and explained and torn into those little you're right, tiered it down to the level that every individual, I mean, for example, it talks about play as a source of learning for the early childhood. Teachers don't understand. Years ago, I was in one school and I said that, so you do play-based learning. The children go out and play and then they come back and do the work. I mean, on a funnier side, that was an interpretation of a small town private school, very small town private school. I'm not even talking about a government school. So again, goes back into understanding what.
And is it the first time we are incorporating things like play in our education system?
No, it's always been there. It's been there forever.
At a policy level, though,
even the other NEP talked about play and experiential learning.
So this NEP came in after 32 years.
Yeah.
There are 6-7 drafts that have been coming, though they were not called the education policy. There were different white papers through the years that have more or less talked about similar things, right? The National Education Policy that we have today has culled out a lot of the good stuff which has already been talked about in the past, recommended by various committees, put it all together to create NEP 2020. But having said that, also there is a lot of, idealistic language that goes into NEP 2020. Now, when I say 21st century skills, I have not yet, Neeti, found anybody who can define what that means.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now somewhere you have to break it down into bite-sized pieces and also into a sequential structure of how.
So with NEP, we've done a what and we've done a why, but the how we've not gotten.
No, but it is also to each one's interpretation. And that is what scares me so much. That if we will leave the how to be interpreted by the individuals and by the schools.
No, you have an overall framework. Obviously.
Yes, but how if you're leaving it to be interpreted, that scares me. I mean, I've seen some of the great educators who talk about NEP and it just scares me what they're talking about and how they're talking.
One of the things we're doing is creating what I call communities of practice, right? Now for government schools, what happens is I'm here and I'm doing something really innovative within my school. There's another school 2 kilometers away. The guy has no idea about what I'm doing. I went to this school in Gujarat, sweet little school. The headmaster there, very enthusiastic headmaster, he was teaching his children about saving money and interest, right? So there was this little tiffin box, those little steel boxes we used to carry to school 100 years ago. So one of those little boxes.
That multi-decker wala.
No.
Single.
Beyond your time. It used to be a little aluminium box with a handle. Okay.
Yeah.
And it had these
Great
clips on
year.
the side.
Yeah, on the side you should open. Yeah.
So he had actually,
yes.
kept one of those boxes and told children, "You any money you want to save, you put in here, and I will give you X%
Oh.
interest, right? And this way, the pocket money that you have, you can grow." So I asked him. I said, "Where would you get the interest from? It's all going into this box." He says, "Every year, at the end of the year, we have a school mela, and we make enough money there. They don't need to know where we are making that money, but they know that because they've saved, they're earning interest on their money." I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
We're talking about all these big things, financial literacy, and here's this guy happily doing it in his school, right? Now, by creating communities of practice, what we're trying to do, and it's still in the ambition stage, is creating, and you talk about technology. Create a portal like a virtual common room, where only teachers have access, so that they are free
Right.
to speak to each other, right? And create a virtual common room where they come in, they can exchange. And I would not say only this good practice. And this is what, by the way, I mean local level innovation, the whole frugal innovation story. And share the practices and all of it, but also
Right.
share anxieties,
Yeah.
share frustration,
Yeah.
share worry. You keep
Shout outs
talking
to say,
about
"I need this help."
socio-emotional support. Peer-to-peer support is the best form of support. And it's not expensive, creating a portal and creating a virtual, common room.
Yeah.
So what Ratna is talking about, so I'll talk more from the private school perspective and also the private examination body. So in an IB setup, an international baccalaureate setup, they have a portal which is called the Program Resource Center. And PRC, all schools who are an IB school, their teachers have access to that. And there they have this portal of teachers coming in, sharing that I did this and this worked well for my class, and sharing that. Also asking questions that, I'm stuck here and I'm teaching this unit and I want to talk about this. How do I do it? So there's a whole lot of ideas that are being shared. So much so, some of these PYP schools and MYP and DP and all those teachers have made communities on Facebook. As simple as that. And somebody posts that, I'm doing this unit and I want to collaborate with a school anywhere in the world. And I'm a school in Africa, or I'm a school in Japan. And then people start writing that, okay, I'd love to connect with you. And they send, and then you inbox and then you share your emails. And that's how collaborations start. So there's huge number of communities in private sector where they are already collaborating with each other through
And I think
virtual
this is what we
medium.
need to do for government schools.
The government schools,
and
absolutely.
create that level of.
Are there any plans happening for something like this? Because this is like a very doable thing.
No,
right?
we're already in talks with because we work with the government of Haryana as well. So, and it's Haryana being a highly urbanized state, internet connectivity is not a problem, because you do need connectivity. And so we are actually working with them to create this portal and create communities of practice. Now, in a place like Arunachal, where it is only 10% connectivity, what we've asked them, that create this big virtual common room within the same district. Let head teachers visit each other's schools and spend 2 days. Do some classroom observation, talk to other teachers, see what's happening. The culture of learning and sharing doesn't have to be driven by money and resources, right? But it has to. The problem is we'll have to coordinate and facilitate this till they see the virtue in it, and then it'll go on auto mode. Just creating it and leaving it, it falls apart.
And such things are already happening in the private sector, already and hugely. Sharing good practices, visiting each other's schools, and getting a mentor school, especially in the IB primary years PYP world. So Northern India has about 50 odd schools who are either candidate schools for the primary years program or are already authorized. And so they handhold each other and they take each other through the journey. They do sharing good practices, they do job-alike sessions, virtual and physical, both kinds. So different schools host it, and that's become a very good practice. And then nobody has to spend money on it. You see, it's not about money. It's about sharing your ideas and thoughts, and that doesn't need money for doing it.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
So now I have a question. It's not necessarily a criticism of the private system, but it does pose questions of access to me, right? Because only a certain class of parents would be able to enroll their children into a private setting. How is the private side of the education system working to tackle that, or and do they consider this like an issue as well? If Niti can answer.
No, so what I understand is that you're looking at a private sector where the parents are who have that entitlement or have that resources to be able to access that, versus children in the government schools not getting that access.
And wouldn't that alienate a large chunk of population?
It does. So as per the right to education, when you talk about schools needing to have 10 to 25% of children from the economically weaker section to be part of your school, that's something which has been said and written, and schools have to follow it. So that was done to look at that the good, or let's say the private education is available to everybody. And those children who can make it or are in the vicinity, I see it a little differently. That when you're trying to bring in children with no means and resources behind them, and from the economically weaker section, and trying to put them into those very fancy schools where they look at other children with all the resources, you're trying to, somewhere also let them realize that, oh my God, I don't have this and I don't have that, and also feel sorry for themselves. Rather, if I were to have a system and if I were to look at this system, I would say that have these private schools adopt one school and make sure that whatever practices they're doing in their schools, teaching, learning, whatever good practices they're running, their professional development they're doing in their schools, go ahead, take it to that school and implement that in that school, whatever it requires. And honestly, if you want resources, like Ratna said, you go out and walk out and bring in a leaf and observe a leaf, you only need that. You don't need many fancy resources to be able to make your teaching learning better. So I would look at it that instead of telling private schools to say that get all the children in, go and impact a larger chunk and say go take a school under you and start helping that school to develop and build.
Just one thing I want to bring in here, Niti. There's been a massive amount of research and documentation that has gone into this whole 25% EWS access for children. What it has ended up doing is creating a huge deal of resentment within those children for not only to the school as such, because you have children talking about going on foreign holidays.
Yeah, absolutely.
They actually start looking down on their parents. They turn hostile. They start stealing from home to be able to afford things. And
the gap is widening for them.
It's such an unequal divide that I think it's what shall I say, an exercise that should never have taken place.
I agree with you
about this. And like Niti said, it makes more sense to go and support a school. If you're a private school, go support a school with good practice and all of it. But don't do this, because it is just a horrific joke on those children who are seeing things and they know they will never be a part of it.
Was a part of this exercise also to promote like interaction within, let's say, students from like a economically weaker section, and also to have both of them put in the same classroom and see and boost their interaction with each other? Was that an objective?
Not at all.
I don't see that as a real-time objective, because that's not serving the purpose of whatever they would have thought about it. Like Ratna said, it is creating a far bigger divide and resentment in the lives of these children. And so many hours are going into counseling these children to say that appreciate what you're getting.
Instead of the 25% reservation, they put aside 25% of each child's fees. And that money go and, develop a school further.
Precisely.
And work with the school better.
Absolutely. And improve the lives of all those 100 in that school. Why just 25 in that school?
Yeah, I think again that that process in itself would also be so politicized. Which 4 students then you pick out of a class of 100 then?
It's I can assure you, Anjali, it's a very, very unhappy space. For the parents involved, for the children involved. And, it's not like the other children are being deliberately cruel.
They just live in their life.
Mean. Yeah. They just who they are. Right? Yeah. And then you suddenly expect them, those children, you need to be extra sensitive. Then pity comes in. And that's not what another child needs.
Yeah.
right? So it's
At that
an
age.
equal system.
So, I mean, I think it's also because the gap is that wide, you know, from a government to a private school, that gap is very wide, which is where I think, Ratna, you mentioned, and you were not too happy mentioning it, are your mid budget private schools.
That's a nightmare space. That's a real nightmare. And it's in Delhi. I can tell you it's in Delhi because I know my people who work for me, their children, it's aspirational. They go to those schools
Yeah.
because they say Angrezi padhayenge unko. It's an English school. And they take a lot more money than a Sarkari school does. And the Sarkari school teaches 20 times better, right? But because it's what they call a private school, they feel it'll teach better. And I know for a fact that for one of my staff, 2 years, there was no teaching whatsoever. The school was closed. When it opened, he was told, deposit 32,000 rupees tomorrow or your child can't come to school. Where is he going to grow that from? You know, so that particular segment, they're understaffed. They do not have quality teachers. A lot of it is run by, small level politicians or others. And what happens in those schools is it sells a dream.
To the most vulnerable
Yeah.
people.
Those who just want to move out of the government to a private school, could be any school.
So you say कि इतना बड़ा तो मैं afford कर नहीं सकता, सरकारी स्कूल तो ठीक नहीं, तो ये ठीक होगा. And they end up in a hellhole.
And it's like a worst of both worlds
Yeah,
because
the
they don't have
worst
the
of both.
resources of a private school and their teachers
Not
are
the
understaffed.
teaching quality of a government
Yeah.
school. So it's actually not a great space. And I think somewhere people are going to start looking at it, start assessing quality, start looking at the teaching parameters. Right now, I think it's just, it's like mushroomed. You remember, Nifty, there used to be these little clinics that would open with every quack in every college. It's
These
a
schools,
bit like
I
that
also
now.
call them mushroom schools. And some of the bigger chains also mushroom schools like that. Mushroom schools are the ones. That's the term for them.
So now we are nearing the end. And I want to specifically talk about how can these two extremes of government and private schools, how can they coexist and how can they work together and learn from each other? Because I would say, please correct me if I'm wrong, that the government side of things has a problem of stress and quality, I would say. And obviously the private side of thing has problems of access, they have problems of affordability, right? So how can we find a bridging gap so that we can ensure, as you said, that it's like a basic right to give
So there
education?
are a lot of
and-
agencies, Pratik, the not-for-profit sector and the social impact sector. They work across. So they would collaborate with private schools. They would collaborate, like we collaborate with a lot of agencies abroad because we are a UK-based charity, right? So, and you try to bring, good practice. I don't use the word best practice ever because that means you stop. You can't go
Yeah.
beyond. So good practice. So you pick it up from other places and then you try to create programs, you try to create interventions, you try to create tools, framework structures, which you then go and work with the government and work with the government
Yeah.
schools to bring these in. So it's not like there is this huge gap and it's never going to change. Of course, it will change. And I think more and more, this whole process of collaboration and partnership and is getting better and better. And
Yeah.
also, I think with the advent of technology, where it doesn't all have to be physical presence, you have large learning sessions, large seminars, lots of places from where you can pick up learning, pick up good practice, and of course, the whole open source concept. Today, a lot of agencies put a huge amount of excellent content into open source. So it's
Yeah.
not like
Yeah.
you have to pay for them, they're copyrighted. All you have to do is ascribe your source, but it's available to be used, right?
No, I would again go back to saying that private schools and government schools could embark on a journey of collaborative work, a better journey, rather than take children from there, but do more collaborative work with them and look at strengthening the teachers' training systems in the government
And is
schools.
that collaboration currently happening and at what level is
Okay,
it
I'll give you a
happening?
little
And would you be-
example. I used to be in a school where the students, because that was an IB school, and as part of IB, students of 11th and 12th have to do CAS, which is creativity, action, and service, and they have to give in certain number of hours. And as part of that, they collaborated with the nearby government school, and that was a primary school. So they said that we want to come here and work in the school. Once a week, these students would go. So they hosted sports day for them. They said, they looked at the flooring. It wasn't really good. They said, let's start working. So they would come back to their school, generate funds through various other activities and take a month. The students would and generate funds through various, cupcake sale and this and that and all that, and generate funds and then go back. So that was part of their, what are they being able to give back to the community, and then actually lay out the floor along with the mason and, do all those jobs as well. But then while these are old children, they're 16, 17-year-olds, they also observed that the teachers were not really teaching the students the way they should be. And they started voicing those concerns that, ma'am, why aren't you teaching? And why are you sitting here? And why your class is just... And this was a primary school. As a result, the principal and the teachers raised a concern that these children from that private school come in and they don't do any work here. They play around and go away. So we don't want them coming in. Because they started questioning what they were doing with the children and how they were working around with the students. And there are things which, I'm not going to name that place or anywhere, but I've also seen it with my eyes that a class of 30 students of grade 5 are sitting and there's one little 2-year-old child running around. So I ended up asking that girl that, oh, that's your little brother? I knew कि घर से बच्चे नहीं होता देखने वाला, बड़ी बहन ले आई होगी or something like that. She said very shyly and sheepishly, she said, no, that's ma'am's child. So she was actually babysitting a teacher's child in her class while she is supposed to be teaching. So the students also saw this. So I feel that to be able to have this proper collaboration, there needs to be better systems. Where if a private school wants to come into the school, then there has to be an openness from the government school also to say that, yes, we want to see what you're doing and see if that impacts us positively. If it doesn't, of course, they have a full right to say, no, don't come back here. You're not doing a good job. But it has to be like a balance, because that school did transform. At the end of the day, the school did transform. They had a better water tank, everything got maintained and things became better in that school, infrastructurally.
Yeah. And why do you think it's not currently happening as extensively?
I think
there is too much of a divide. There is too much of a divide. And there is also, there is this whole aspect of who has the time. There is a curriculum that has to be taught. There is a certain set of classes.
Again, we go back to
the marks.
And that's why the new education policy and the existing system of syllabus, curriculum, lesson khatam karna hai, militate actually. And there needs to be some point where they kind of come together and they hold tight, because otherwise it's not going to be easy. Right?
Yeah.
And like what Neeti said, once in a while you go to another school and you look at it, it's nice, it's a learning experience, but it's not a scalable experience.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to be consistently there to do
and
it.
The whole, the whole, approach, social work as it's called, is now, and you can't blame the children because they've really had no exposure to it in any way.
Yeah.
So then if you say that, oh, you know what, they came, but they were so condescending, that is also unfair. You have to look at both sides of it, right? Because they didn't know any better. This is the first time they're seeing it, and they are coming to it with solutions they understand. So they don't understand कि ये school paint करने में इतने पैसे लगेंगे. They would say, why can't the wall be painted? But in terms of learning, yes, there can be a lot of collaboration. There can be things that can be done. And I think good practice from the private sector can percolate into government teaching and learning, because at a systemic level. So that has nothing to do with anything else.
I think that is a good point to conclude our conversation. We always like to end on an optimistic note.
Yes, that's a good thing.
And I would just ask in the end to the both of you, what is that one final message that you would have our listeners part with? What we started the conversation with, what is your philosophy of education? In the future, what do you see education becoming in the future? And what would you like if a young parent or a student is listening to this conversation, what would you like to leave them with?
The future education, you don't know what kind of jobs are going to be there and how the jobs are changing at the rapid rate. So for me, future education would be to have empowered and skilled individuals who have the know-how of the content, but more conceptually driven individuals. that is where the education will have to lead them to be able to function in a world where you don't know the professions that will exist in 20 years from now. I mean, I didn't know that there would be a job of a consultant, and that what is the role of a consultant. Everybody is a consultant these days, and that's like such a huge thing. But so you're looking at jobs which skilled jobs will always be there. What a skilled job can be done, that those jobs will always have for the future education, one needs to be educated, of course, but also have skills with them to be able to survive in the future world.
Well, for me, very frankly, if you're talking about young parents and what they should be looking at, I think one thing that they should be really concerned with is involving themselves with their children, not patronizing, not condescending, not talking down, but talking with their children. I think that's really important. Number two, like Neeti just said, the world's changing rapidly. So the ability to be agile and the ability to, absorb and learn in a manner that is where you can apply things. Know 4 things, but be able to apply all 4 of them and apply them well, rather than learning 100 things and not knowing how to apply even one of them. And if you are agile, because everything is changing, and there's this whole conversation going on around, can ChatGPT replace teachers? It can't. We are humans. What is ChatGPT? Yes. What is AI? The data point.
We have an answer.
Very, very shameless plug. Our first episode of this podcast was on AI.
And what we concluded was AI is a parrot. It's a tota. It says what you feed into it, which is not what teachers are.
Absolutely. So it can be a tool for teachers, but for teaching, it's a tool. A tool can never replace that individual who does what they do.
It's an enabler. That's it.
Yes. Great. Thanks a lot for this chat, Ratna and Neeti.
Thank you.
I mean,
it
was like such a...
We enjoyed it thoroughly, just to kind of voice our deep thoughts about what we think. And it was amazing interacting with you, Ratna, and Prateek and Anjali. Thank you so much. Really.
Great. And we must keep in touch.
Absolutely.
We both go
Please
down.
do.
Yes,
we shall share those contacts. So, Prateek, how do you feel after this discussion?
I feel educated. I feel that
finally.
Finally. I feel that this discussion should have ended with the words class dismissed.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh, we should add that.
स्टूडियो में घंटी लेके आनी चाहिए यार. Shit. But no, I think हमारा तो पता नहीं, but Neeti and Ratna became great friends by the end of it.
Yeah.
So I think this is what this chat was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a partnership between the public and the private system, and I think this conversation also tells us, and जो हम starting में बोल भी रहे थे कि भाई किसे blame करना है, वो question actually है नहीं वो कि किसे blame करना है. The idea is हम दोनों ऐसा मिले सुर मेरा तुम्हारा की तरह हाथ मिलाएंगे और
because I think we've realized कि जो भी problems है वो मतलब are not exclusive to either one of them. Like whether it's a problem with the teachers or it might be a different like a different degree of the same problem or a different way that
problem का face अलग है, but
but it's more or less basically a child and their environment that really needs to be looked at. And so of course the way that both of these systems function is different, so their way of coming to a solution will also be different. But what I think we've highlighted quite prominently and should be done that way is the idea of collaboration between both of them.
Also, I think the idea of collaboration in general, like with teachers and parents, with students and teachers, with parents and students, with your lawmakers and teachers.
And I'm glad that we did it with both of them together, because it's true that neither of them exist in a vacuum. And I mean, there is at some point the students from both of these institutions are going to become the part of the same society.
Exactly. चाहे तुम गवर्नमेंट स्कूल से आए हो, प्राइवेट से आए हो, तुम्हें काम तो उसी सोसाइटी में करना है ना.
And in the future they will have to work with each other. Talking about the future, I think we did not extensively talk about the NEP, but it is a step in the right direction, but as both of them pointed out, it has its fault lines.
It has its fault lines, and again, the same thing of breaking it down into sizable, manageable chunks, and then giving the freedom to schools and institutions to interpret it in their way. And like, because all government schools aren't the same and all private schools aren't the same, right? वो हमने ब्लैंकेट आइडिया बना रखा है कि अच्छा गवर्नमेंट स्कूल का एक स्टीरियोटाइप होता है और प्राइवेट स्कूल का एक स्टीरियोटाइप होता है, बट both these kinds of institutions exist in a very large spectrum. So it's very important that you lay down these guidelines and then let the principals or the teachers or people who are smart enough and who know the realities of that particular institution, run it the way they want to, right?
And I think we did talk about how systems are sort of, the uniformity that we've made, that is very intrinsic. But just the fact that everything has to be quantitative, everything has to be measured and standardized is where a lot of our problems are.
Nice, interesting. It was a great chat, I think, and I think our listeners would be equally enlightened and educated to learn ki, yaar, there is a problem, but there is also a solution, and also a lot of work is already being done, like the collaborations that Neeti talked about between the private institutions and government institutions. I mean, it's a very nice thing that things like that are happening, and like, to be honest, a lot of times I was like this close to tearing up, and I was like, oh, मतलब इतना मस्त काम हो रहा है, मजा आएगा. अच्छा, before we end, another thing. What is the one thing that you don't understand about today's schooling? Because I have one.
This is one thing that a lot of times, not just at schools, if I just like pause for a second, think about how does it work, and okay, maybe this might not be the best way to do it. I felt the same thing about schools कि बच्चे लाइन में चल रहे हैं, बच्चों के यूनिफॉर्म्स में बेल्ट नहीं है तो उन्हें डांट पड़ रही है. और आई थिंक अबाउट दैट, एंड और एक टाइम होता है जब सबको बोलते हैं कि अभी सब लोगों को खाना खाना है, तो सब साथ में एक लाइन में बैठ के खाना खा रहे हैं. एंड इट फील्स लाइक, कहते हैं ना, देयर आर अ लॉट ऑफ दीज पीपल हु बिलीव दैट वी आर लिविंग इन अ सिमुलेशन, एंड स्कूल्स रियली फील लाइक दैट. एवरीवन इज डूइंग द सेम थिंग एट द सेम टाइम.
11 बजे खाना खाने दो लोगों को, 8-9 बजे भूख लग रही है तो एक रोटी खाने दो, छुप छुप के. इट शुडंट बी अ थिंग दैट नीड्स टू बी स्कोर्ड. लास्ट 2 सीट्स में ऐसे पीछे पास हो रही है कि अरे एक फ्रेंच फ्राई का टुकड़ा ऐसे छुपा के खा रहे हैं. यस, दैट इज वन. एंड वन थिंग आई वुड से इज ऑल ऑफ दीज ग्रुप असेंबलीज एंड ऑल, यार. Also maybe because ours wasn't an indoor assembly, ours was outdoor, so the only way to not attend that assembly is to pretend to faint. Which is why a lot of people in my school took coachings and all. Their biggest reason was कि assembly नहीं attend करनी पड़ेगी. So I am doing football coaching and cricket coaching so that assembly ना वो करने पे. So imagine it's possible that कोई आज IPL में जो player है जो करोड़ों कमा रहा है, he started playing cricket just so that उसे assembly ना जाना पड़े.
Maybe then assemblies aren't as bad.
Ooh, way to turn the episode on its head. Yes, interesting.
All right, on that note, let us conclude this episode.
Thanks a lot for listening to this episode of The Big Story. Thank you, Anjali, for tolerating me. Thank you, Neeti and Ratna, for being a part of this conversation. This was amazing. We'll see you in the next episode. This was Prateek.
And this was Anjali.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The Big Story is a Quint original podcast, executive produced by Shali Walia and Ritu Kapoor. This episode was produced, hosted and edited by Prateek Lidhu and Anjali Palod, and the background music is from BMG Productions. A special thanks to our guests Neeti Bhalla and Ratna Vishwanathan.
You were listening to the Quints podcast.